Hi, hello, welcome back to another Onkruid video. Welcome back to another episode in this deep dive into Irvin Yalom's The Gift of Therapy, the book with 85 tips for young therapists, for clients, for healthcare professionals, for really everyone that is interested. Tip 6, empathy, looking out through the patient's window. Empathy is, of course, a well-known concept in therapy, outside of therapy. I think everybody has a certain idea, a certain conceptualization of what empathy is in their minds, but let's see what Yalom has to say about it. In this little chapter, in this little tip, he starts off with a story about a woman that he once treated, a woman with a cancer diagnosis, who told this story about how she had an important thing to talk to her dad about. She had this subject that she really wanted to discuss with her dad, but her dad was kind of the typical dad, if you will, like the really sour, the bitter, almost always angry type of father that you don't love striking conversation with most of the time. She had this goal of talking about the subject on their way to university when her dad was dropping her off at the university, because that's a long road trip they had together. But during that trip something happened. Her dad was constantly complaining about how nasty this creek was they were driving next to, and how much trash was in it, and how ugly it looked, and the smell. And the girl was sitting in the passenger seat, looked out the window at the creek, and saw this beautiful waterway, nature on both sides, frogs leaping over, to exaggerate a little bit. The core was, okay, he's in a grumpy mood. If he's complaining about something like this, where the creek is this beautiful, this waterway is this beautiful, I'm not going to discuss it. She never got the chance to do it again. Years later, when driving back on that same road, but driving herself now, sitting in the driver's seat, she saw that on the other side of the road was another waterway, was another little river, was another creek, and it was filled to the brim with trash. It was disgusting. So her father was not grumpy at all that day. He was not being bitter. He was just observing the world from his window. And now, years later, she was looking at it from his window and saw that there was a whole different world to look at that point in time. That's where the title comes from this tip, of course, looking out the patient's window. Rogers, the founder of our humanistic therapy approach, was already adamant about the importance of empathy. It's one of his conditions for therapeutic change, next to unconditional positive regard and authenticity or realness. By now, these claims that empathy is so important for therapy and therapeutic change have been backed up by extensive research. Accurate empathy is difficult, however. It entails being tentative, not being sure whether you understand the client or your fellow traveler in a decisive manner, not being sure that you have all the ins and outs, all the nuances immediately understood, but asking them, constantly asking them, do I understand this correctly? I'm hearing you say this, is that right? Are you telling me this? Am I correct in assuming that you mean this? Do you feel this right now? Ask them all the time. Really test whether you are on the same wavelength, whether you are catching up with their story, whether you are following along accurately and being really truly empathic. Yalom's experience has shown time and time again that clients and therapists, so that both travelers, have vastly different memories, different evaluations, different images in their mind of how sessions went, or about what was important in the session, what was helpful. Clearly emphasized in his book, Every Day Gets a Little Closer, where he and his client Ginny, a pseudonym, I made a video about this a couple of years back, so you can watch that if you want, both wrote after therapy reports after every session, and the differences were striking. She didn't even hear his analysis, she didn't even hear his clear insights. She appreciated him saying sorry for being a couple of minutes late. She appreciated him laughing at her jokes. It's so striking that you don't have the same idea about what has happened that past hour at all. So don't assume that you know how it was for the client, or how it is in the here and now, right here, right now for the client. Ask. It's disastrously difficult trying to understand what's going on in another person, or how they are perceiving the world around them. It's not easy to stand in your shoes, even when you're avidly trying to do so. A helping factor, according to Yalom, is knowing about their past. He gives the example of somebody that has experienced a lot of loss in their life that shapes the way you look at the world. It makes you maybe a little bit less trustful towards the goodness of humanity, towards, especially if it's because of accidents or murders or something like that, but it makes you realize that life can be short. It makes you live a different kind of life, seeing that much death in your life, and knowing that information about a client can really help you understand why their window is built up like that, why they look out of their window and see the world in that specific sense. My thoughts on the subject: It's not a new insight, of course. Roger, so many years back when he formulated his conditions for therapeutic change, already left his mark on the therapy world, and those conditions are engraved in my mind, and they get their expression. They are to be found in every single therapy session I administer, without a doubt. I am trying to be authentic, I am trying to be unconditionally positively regarding my client, and I am definitely trying to be empathic as well. But my view of the world aside, my frame of reference to the side, and really try to indulge in theirs. Having a little metaphor is never a bad idea though. It's never a bad idea to keep those concepts fresh and lively in your mind, and I think it's a nice addition to me always telling the clients, I'm standing in your shoes. I'm trying to look at it from your shoes. Looking at it through their window is maybe even a better metaphor. So even though I already knew about this tip, because it's just like a basic condition for therapy in my opinion, it's still helpful to read about it. A great reminder also to never assume and always ask, because I know that's a trap I sometimes fall into, because I think I understand their story, I think I'm completely following along. It's not always the case, and I need to pay attention to that some more. Thank you very much for watching, hope to see you in the next one, bye bye.